You wanted to sit here?
She said I'd come back. So I would say.
I'll slide, that's all right, I'll slide back over to this one. This will be where I'm sitting.
Sounds little chaos. I said, you'll figure it out. It's for one box. She's ordered
Right.
all we want. Coming.
So. Said, although if there's one resident. So.
After us, it's probably a good thing. Denny's in there, there's already one in there, and I'm like, well, I was gonna throw. This is for tonight.
What? Are you connected to the?
Plan B?
Probably don't want to.
I don't know how many.
Yeah, well, you gotta. See, I hear that, and that's what I was.
Oh, that one, red light's not. Nope, this one's recording.
But we're thinking up 4 days, right?
Are we ready?
I want to run.
Are we good?
Yeah, good. That's fine.
Okay, it is 5:30. We'll call this meeting of the Public Works and Highway Committee to order. Attendance shows all committee members are present. I'll entertain approval of the minutes from August 2nd.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes as written.
I'll second it.
Any comments or changes to the minutes? None? We'll vote. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It's unanimous. Next, we'll have public comment. Is there anybody here who would like to comment on something? Please come up. State your name and address in 3 minutes, please.
Sure. Melanie Smythe, N140W17938 Cedar Lane. I came here expecting a presentation from Ehlers on the water utility cash flow study, so I hope that's scheduled for another time because I don't see it on the agenda. It's a very important study, I believe. It shows that the water utility is in trouble and will require 2 more additional rate hikes of something like 15% and 8% after the second current rate hike that hasn't yet taken effect. And I think this is important information that you should consider as a committee during this budget consideration. In the study, it also talks about $10 million of capital improvements that will need to be paid out over the next several years. I think it's 5 to 10. I'm not exactly sure. I'm doing it from memory. So I'm asking that this gets put onto a future agenda. The other thing I'm asking for, and this is going to be difficult and it's not any fun, but under the current economic situation, I'm asking this committee to be leaders and to request that the village administrator produce a budget for 2024 that includes a look at what a 6% cut across operations might look like, except for public safety, with a 10% reduction in road projects, just as a look. We need to be able to do this, see this kind of dollar effect in order to be able to make good decisions and decide if a referendum or a partial referendum or whatever else might be needed to address the issue that we have with underfunded public safety. This will be hard, but it has to be looked at in concern for next year's budget and the following year's budget. And this would be leadership, and it would be greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Public comment?
Thank you, Scott Heffley, W159 N10514, Old Farm Road, Germantown. 3 quick points tonight. I did look through the agenda, obviously looking at option 1 for the rehab of Holy Hill Exchange. There's no way that Germantown can come up with $4 million to split the cost of Richfield and the total redo. So if the state's willing to pay $6.5 million to rehab that, the truck traffic and everything is increasing exponentially out there. We know that it's going to continue to increase. If the state's willing to fix it in a few years, let's take their money and fix it. Certainly, we are owed that money in so many ways. Also looking at the budget presentation, and I know we have some things to go through. I keep saying, I'm the guy that comes up and I don't know if I complain about the budget or I point things out, but I do something, okay? We always get confused between our operational budget and the borrowing we do, and I don't like those two put together in one. We have to fix our operational hole of $900,000 in our budget first. The capital borrowing, unless it's for an emergency thing that we have to do, can always wait. We can address that at another time. We can do parking lot items. You guys, I believe, have done it in February or March to look at how we borrow for whatever. If it's not an emergency that we have to have today, then we don't need to worry about throwing all this out there and expecting the village board to approve all this capital borrowing when we're not sure if we have the money to pay the payments to do the capital borrowing, because those are still loans with taxpayer dollars attached for repayment. So let's get the whole picture before we start just saying we're just going to approve everything. So Fund 40 should wait. They'll have their time and moment in the sun to come out and say, why do we need this? And I know the utility superintendents are here, and I don't expect an answer at all, but I did see in the budget presentation, and as I remind everybody, I'm on the Utility Advisory Committee, so I pay attention. The maintenance cost for the water utility is scheduled to go up $200,000 or 131% for 2024 budget. I do want to answer on where that money's coming from. I'd like to see it at some point, if Terry thinks it's okay for utility advisory or me or whoever to look at it, because that's a huge increase and there needs to be an explanation of why it's that large in any kind of budget item like that. Thank you.
Thank you for coming forward. Anybody else?
Good evening. Good evening. I'm Jan Miller. I'm one of the trustees, by the way. Nice to meet you. I really have a lot of respect for this committee and for all of the trustees on this board. And one of my comments tonight is I don't appreciate the super overlapping of all these committee meetings tonight. Trying to cram in a lot of information that happens to be extremely important in my eyes. We also didn't get the agendas until Friday afternoon on a long holiday weekend and 2 amended updates on the agendas. So I would appreciate, a complete agenda if that's at all possible. Also, from the Administrator Kreklo's weekly report, the Ellers water cash flow analysis was supposed to be presented tonight. And I take those weekly reports very seriously. I usually have questions for that. I don't know if any of you do, but I'm very disappointed that that portion is not going to be discussed tonight because you have a presentation on the 2024 budget with water utility. So I think it's a little preempted to have the 2024 water utility and sewer utility budget presentations until we see the Ellers reports. It's an opinion. The unfinished business on item A, roadwork, Manor Court discussion. Whatever our policy is, I'm just pointing out that it was written in 2010. I don't know if that has to be re-looked at, but I thought perhaps it should be updated. In addition to that, new business. The update on the interim DP director and recruitment of the new DP director and village engineer. I'm very excited to see where we are at this point. But I also would like to caution this committee for taking any kind of action on the Department of Transportation proposed rehabilitation of Holy Hill Interchange and the state municipal funding agreement with the Wisconsin Highway 168 from Interstate 41 to 145. Why? Because we don't have those key people in place. Perhaps they have some input. And I think that's something we should consider. Thank you for your considerations.
Thank you, trustee. Anybody else? And we will move on to old business, unfinished business. Unfinished business A, roadwork and Manor Court discussion. Is there anybody here from Manor Court? Because I did get a call yesterday from the neighborhood saying they would like this put off until October. Is this an echo chamber tonight or is it just me? This is awful. Anyway, so I just wanted to be sure there was nobody here for that topic before I will entertain a motion to postpone until October.
Postpone the unfinished business item A until our next meeting in October.
Second that.
Any comments or questions? A vote, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It's unanimous. We will address that in October. Item B, well number 7, change order.
Good evening. Before you tonight, we, by direction of the Public Works Committee back on August 2nd, it was required that J. Miller Electric cover $4,000 out of the $11,356 needed for a purchase of a NEMA cabinet to complete the installation of the variable speed drive at well 7. The attached signed change order attests to that change requirement. The $4,000, yes.
Perfect. Now we have no microphones.
They're working to try to adjust.
Okay, I'll talk loud. Committee?
I'll make a motion to put in a change order in the amount covered by the water utility to be $7,356. To account number 50-18-0-18-2-3900 with J Miller Electric covering an additional $4,000.
I will second that.
Any further discussion on that? I would thank them for doing that. I think it's the right thing to do, and it makes us very happy, I think, as speaking for the committee. We'll vote. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? It's unanimous. Thank you. Moving on to the Recreation Trail and Design for East Donges Bay Road, the reconstruction project.
And I can start out and just introduce, we have Julie Chapman from Grafe Engineering here this evening. At the last Public Works Committee meeting, the committee asked some questions about the bikeability, if I invented a word, of Donges Bay Road. And Ms. Chapman is the engineer with Grafe, who's been doing the design. I passed those questions on, and she has a few slides here that walk through the answers to those questions.
Is it still on?
It's still on.
Okay. So good evening. I'm the project manager for Donges Bay on behalf of Grafe, working for the village. Steve had mentioned a couple of questions that the village did have in regards to Donges Bay. The first one that I've listed here is, can we make the sidewalk asphalt instead of concrete? And so ultimately, it is the village's decision. I'm just here to present you the options and kind of the background info on this. As part of this slideshow, I do have kind of the plans laid out, but just kind of want to step back real quick to kind of lay out basically what's happening on Donges if you're not familiar. We are doing improvements essentially from the roundabout of 145 to Washington Drive is considered a mill and overlay project. So we're taking away the 4 lanes, putting in 2 travel lanes and putting in a 2-way left turn lane, which is also known as a twiddle. And then we're using that additional area within the footprint of the roadway to put in on-street bike accommodations or bike lanes. They are full bike width in terms of a 5-foot essentially area for the bicyclist, and then the curb and gutter is adjacent to that. So this all still fits within the existing footprint of the roadway. From Washington Drive to Wasaki is considered more of a reconstruction project. Its major component is the culvert that goes underneath Donges Bay, which is on the screen. This is getting widened due to the very little cover that is currently on the existing culvert, but then we're also widening to accommodate the future plan that's shown on the screen. So again, this is continuing the 2 lanes of travel, also continuing the on-street bike lanes, and then providing turn lanes within the middle of the roadway. And so as we're looking at these different questions, I kind of put in some hatching patterns on the plans themselves so you could see what the options are as we go through this. So the first question again, can we make the sidewalk asphalt instead of concrete? And can the sidewalk be widened to 8 feet? And so as we kind of pan through this, if you want to press the next one, we don't get until essentially the Town 9 Parkway entrance into the DPW site. The blue hatching that is to the west of the driveway is really the only area that we can widen between Washington and Town 9. Reason being is because there is existing wetlands, and they are delineated basically to the gravel shoulder of Donges Bay. So we tried to reduce the impacts of the wetlands in this area so that we didn't have to go through an individual permit process. Unfortunately, the DNR views the wetlands that are in the gravel shoulder as legitimate wetlands and not necessarily overgrowth, so we cannot stay underneath the 10,000 square feet that's dictated by a general permit. Therefore, the village is going through the individual permit process. As we continue further east, basically from Town 9 Parkway to the TID 9 driveway or the Keller entrance, the Keller driveway, that area can be widened to accommodate a asphalt path or even converted to an asphalt sidewalk. And then as you continue further east from there, the portion between the TID 9 driveway and out to Wasaki, if you want to go to the next page. That area can be widened and converted as well. From a construction standpoint, though, the curb ramps will have to be adjusted to accommodate the additional width that we're looking at. So as of right now, we have, I believe it's a 5-foot sidewalk. And so we'd have to widen the curb ramps an additional 3 feet. However, the concrete still has to remain at the curb ramps because you have to place the detectable warning fields in concrete, not in asphalt. So you're still going to have concrete sidewalk as a bid item on this project. From a asphalt perspective, you are likely going to pay a little bit more of a premium for the asphalt path due to the fact that they're not going to be able to get a piece of equipment in there to fully build out the asphalt path itself. They will have a slip machine to be able to do the sidewalk, and they're already building portions of the sidewalk already. So it's already kind of encompassed in the project, whereas the asphalt sidewalk is considered probably more an additional item. So that's why you'd probably likely pay a premium for it. In terms of the other question that was mentioned, can the sidewalk path be moved onto the Keller site? So I've included a cross section here that kind of shows essentially what the, I guess, section of Donjas Bay is going to look like. The Keller site does almost reverse the direction of the profile of Donjas Bay. So where Donjas Bay is lower and increases in height, the Keller site's doing the complete opposite. So they're almost like crisscrossing in a pattern, which makes the connection of our existing topography into the Keller site a little bit more difficult. And so as you can see, we are doing quite a bit of excavation for the roadway itself in terms of widening, and then matching into the Keller site is even getting steeper. So we've worked with Steve and Larry at the time to kind of try to balance out the common excavation associated with this project in conjunction with Keller's fill area. So from that perspective, you're looking at quite a costly improvement to move the sidewalk onto the Keller site. From a liability perspective, you're moving a public sidewalk onto a private property. So there's definitely a liability where you'd probably want to look at purchasing a permanent limited easement so that the sidewalk is sitting within the PLE and more under the jurisdiction of the village versus under the jurisdiction of Keller. If anybody were to get injured on that sidewalk, you want to make sure that the village is owning that sidewalk and that land essentially. So you definitely would have to have some type of agreement between Keller and the village. And as I mentioned, the feasibility of designing the ADA compliant curb ramps is definitely a difficult task. We just actually finished completing the design of the ramps themselves with what we're showing on the screen. And they are on the higher end of the threshold in terms of slopes and whatnot. So to try and match into a site that is complete opposite direction of Donjas Bay is going to be even more difficult than what we already have. So I guess that's kind of the presentation. I hope I answered some of your questions and laid it out as nice as possible. But just, I guess, in the end, the village is the client, so you guys make the decision in terms of if you want concrete or asphalt, or if you want an asphalt path, in addition to the on-street bike accommodations.
And thank you for that. You might want to stay up there because I'm sure there'll be some questions from the committee. How far along are we on the current road project with the bike lanes?
So in, I guess, a non-DOT world, we just submitted the plans to utilities. So utility companies are looking at the plans and designing their infrastructure in terms of relocations. In a percentage world, it's at about 75 to 80% complete. So really, we're trying not to change the geometrics of Donjas Bay at all if possible, just because then we have to go back to utilities and ask for them to review again and go through that same iteration process that we just already started like 2 or 3 months ago.
So it potentially could delay things by
Yes.
a couple of months?
Yes, it potentially could.
Okay.
But I would try to work with them as efficiently as possible to hopefully not impact that, but it's hard to say at this point.
And I think my microphone's off again. And if we decided, even though, to go with this asphalt path and to do this bike lane, do we have any idea at this point how much additional money we're talking about? I mean, it's a difficult question, I understand, but I'm even just looking at a ballpark.
Well, I'd say maybe in the $20,000 range if I'm just ballparking it off the top of my head. I'm just trying to add up some numbers in my head. I would say it's probably around that. I haven't actually crunched the numbers in terms of widening and changing to asphalt.
And that's just the engineering part of it?
No, that's.
Or is that the
just-
asphalt laid
that's
as
the
well?
Construction aspect of it.
Okay.
From an engineering perspective, I'd say probably no more than 10,000.
So this could potentially, if we're willing to put all that crazy work into it, do it for like less than $40,000,
Yes.
the whole thing.
Yes.
Okay, committee, I open it up to you.
What was our reason again for wanting, what was our reason again for wanting to talk about asphalt versus concrete?
One of our last meetings, and Phil, correct me here, because I know that you were very engaged in this conversation too. We had a gentleman in here, an avid biker. I don't know beyond that who he was.
I'm the Park and Rec, representative from the Park and
Okay.
Rec Commission.
Okay,
Steve Staple.
really, and he was pushing to make this contiguous, because Mequon is doing this, to make it go through Germantown, because we're trying to do this trails thing in Germantown now. At least we're more or less committed to it, I think. And so how could we make this work, was the conversation at that meeting. And he was quite the advocate for it, and we all kind of thought it sounded like a great idea, and then sent it back to Steve and to Grafe to come back with their viewpoint on it, the cost, a general cost of it, and what it would take, or what it would entail to do something like this.
Was Mequon at the 8 feet as well? Or were they 5 foot?
I don't know.
The answer.
I don't think they were the 8 feet, correct?
The information that, that we received from actually another part of Grafe that's been working on the court plan, and they did review Mequon's trail plan. It is, they do have within their trail plan, at some point in the future, Donjas Bay trails going east from Wazaki Road to, and I forget the name of the park that they have. It's about a mile and a half down the road. And they're not at a design phase. I think it is one of the lower ranked projects in their trail plan, but there is a possibility that at some point in the future, they might have some trails, whether they're on road or off road. That I think it's too early to tell.
I think their current path is 8 feet, though. I remember this from years ago, going out there and measuring that. It's definitely more than 5 feet in width, the one that goes kind of up to that Lemke Park.
You have asphalt.
Well, and, you know, please jump in but there's asphalt on Donjas Bay, west of Fond du Lac Avenue. On the east of Fond du Lac Avenue, it's a concrete sidewalk from Fond du Lac Avenue on the north side of Donjas Bay that ends at approximately where the bridge is, Washington Drive.
Sidewalk,
There's a concrete sidewalk,
Concrete
yes.
sidewalk.
sidewalk on the south side.
North side.
Yes.
There's a concrete sidewalk on the south side till across the street from the school district building. On the north side, there's a concrete sidewalk that runs from 145 to Washington Drive.
Right, and the initial plans would then continue the concrete sidewalk on the south side of the road up to Wazaki. And I think when we were designing this, that definitely was conversation and thought put into the idea of having a bike path available. The road itself is designed with a 7-foot wide bike path on each side of the road.
Yeah, I've actually biked and run that road hundreds and hundreds of times. Biking on that road is, dangerous right now. And the new DPW building is not going to help.
Well, in some ways, I think, and I would agree, I'm a biker myself. I haven't biked that road and I don't think that I would, given its current condition. But I think that with the widening of the road, the markings of it, the fact that I know some of the commenters at the last meeting talked about the glass that's present. It is going to be near the Public Works building where street sweepers are going to be going by on a daily basis, during street sweeping season. So I think it would be improved. There's still going to be a significant amount of traffic, but I think it would be significantly improved from what it is right now.
Yeah, I've been reading this and the recommendation is to stay with the, it says 5-foot bike path on both sides. Is that right? Or is it going to be 7?
So from Washington to the roundabout, it will be 7 because we're staying within the existing footprint of the roadway.
Okay.
From Washington to Wasaki, it is 5 feet because we had to modify the design in order to appease the DNR because the entire north side of Donjas Bay is all wetland essentially. So we really had to minimize the impacts as much as possible to Donjas Bay, or to the wetland because of Donjas Bay. So it is 5 feet from Washington to Wasaki.
And the sidewalk that's proposed is going to go from the existing sidewalk right now, but cross the road to the south and then go all the way east to Wasaki, right?
Correct. Yes, sir.
Okay. I mean, my gut says to keep the design the way it is.
And this is not to like preclude from future improvements. Like if the village decided that with the future developments coming in, there could be some minor modifications to the curb ramps and then installation of or widening of the path in the future. You're looking at a little bit of a throwaway cost because you're removing the concrete and putting in the path, but at least it's coming in at the time of when the remainder of the path would be completed then too.
Is it that we write a lot of tickets for riding bikes on a sidewalk? I mean, honestly, we've got a 5-foot concrete sidewalk here and people are going to use it for bikes. They're not going to stay on the road path.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Because it's safe,
Because it's safe.
because it's safe.
So do we need a change in design is my question. I don't think we do.
I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to keep the recreational trail and design for East Donjas Bay Road as it is right now.
I'll second that.
Any further discussion? I'm personally on the fence on this one because yes, we're so far along and we don't have lots of money left over to do things with. And yet, as it was brought up at our last meeting, this is a once in a how many year opportunity to make this connection. When is Mequon going to complete their bike path? Do we know that? So it might be 2-3 years from now. At least, well, but then maybe that's the time to revisit this. When it can be connected. But I am on the fence on this because I would like to see, first of all, safety. If anybody does bike up that way, past the Public Works building, I don't see a lot of bikes up there, but
Because the road is
yeah,
disastrous right now.
yeah. Okay. Any other comments? We'll vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? 1. Me.
2.
2. Okay. Village board without a decision. No consent agenda, obviously. Okay.
Let's go to the board.
That was actually,
Good.
that's up to the committee, I believe, if you want to send this to the board.
Well, we have a stalemate vote, basically, so you can't do anything without
Oh, would fail.
failed. Yeah,
That's a good
So-
point. So
It
it
has to
fails,
go to the
it
board.
fails mine, which means that you're right. There's no.
it has to go to the board because you can't go ahead and do anything if,
Okay, we can send that.
yeah, sorry.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay, moving on to new business, update on interim DPW director and recruitment of new DPW director and village engineer. And this is you, Steve?
I'm going to ask Bruce Stelzner,
Okay.
who's from Public Administration Associates, to give a brief report.
Today happens to coincide with the closing of the recruitment process for both the director and the village engineer's position. And we did talk about this at the village board meeting on August 7th about how tight the market is for recruitments in both of those positions. And that held true, even though the recruitment is still open till midnight tonight. I have a total of 4 applicants for the Public Works Director, none of them who are qualified. And we have 1 application for the village engineer's position. That person is qualified. So at this point, the recruitment process, again, has ended, or will end later on tonight, with really no or minimal results in terms of what the market is. Again, the market very tight in the recruitment area. And if you remember on August 7th at the village board meeting, we did talk about salary. We did talk about making a change to the requirements for a professional engineer for the director's job. And none of that changed. And so we followed through with the recruitment, put it out for about a month. And again, at this point, total of 5 applications, 4 for the director, not qualified, 1 for the village engineer that is qualified.
So what's happening with the village engineer? We're going to make an offer to this person who's qualified?
I don't know that yet. Again, the opening is still available through yet tonight, so it hasn't
Understand
been,
that?
closed.
I'm just saying, so logically, tomorrow morning, when you wake up, what would you do?
Yeah, I'm not really sure yet at this point.
At this point, my next step is to brief the village president, the appointment to the village engineers by the village president to be
Okay,
confirmed by the village board. So when I wake up tomorrow morning, I have a weekly Thursday morning meeting
okay.
with the village president, and this will be one of the first things on the
And
agenda.
he also has reviewed the public works directors, potential ones who have submitted resumes.
No, he hasn't. He's welcome to if he'd like, but none of them meet the minimum qualifications. So
Where did they fall really far short?
They fall significantly short. It's not just minimally short, it's significant.
So in time on the job, what else? Help me.
Their background doesn't meet the.
They didn't
meet the
even
minimum
work for a
requirements.
village or a town?
Does not meet the minimum requirements of your position.
Okay,
So they just don't qualify. We wouldn't bring them forward. PAA would not bring them forward. They're just not qualified. The PAA will bring forward the name of the applicant for the village engineer's position. That person is qualified. And we have to go through a process in order to get to the point whether that's acceptable or not. So I think, at the end of the day, unless we do something different as a village with the salary range and changing, I think the requirement of a professional engineer in your director's position and make that is a preferred alternative to for the recruitment, we're going to struggle. Currently, there's Whitefish Bay is doing a recruitment for a public works director. Their salary range is 115,000 to 130,000. Again, that's what the PAA recommended at your village board meeting on August 7th. That would be the range that you need to be in. And again, you really need to be in that range. Whitefish Bay is not requiring a professional engineer. They are requiring significant background in public works management and administration, but not the professional engineering degree.
in your experience, do most places require a professional engineer in that position?
It's about 50-50. And again, by recruiting a village engineer, you kind of minimize the need to have that professional engineer as your public works director. You know, public works director really should have a broad sense of knowledge, just broad, but it might be shallow. It might be shallow, but it's very broad, and very inclusive.
Mhm.
Your engineer has a very short range of knowledge, but it's very deep.
Mhm.
And so if you have those two elements working with you, your village will be successful. So in most situations where villages only hire a public works director, the PE is always preferred. You may not get it, but it's always preferred. When you're hiring both like a village engineer and a public works director, where you have the engineer as a professional engineer, that kind of minimizes the need for the public works director to have that credential. But again, you want their knowledge to be very broad. It can be deep in spots.
Mhm.
It can be shallow through that whole spectrum. But as the engineer goes, it's less broad and really deep in the engineering area. So I really think you have like maybe 2 or 3 different alternatives to consider. One is to change the requirement of a professional engineer to a preferred professional engineer. That's one element. 2 is to implement a significant salary increase in both of those slots. And that may be as simple as following the recommendation that we put out and that Public Administrations put out in the August 7th letter. Or you may have another alternative, which is just moving the village engineer up 1 spot on your current pay grid and the public works director up 1 spot on your current pay grid. That may also satisfy that need.
This is just for discussion tonight. Am I correct, Steve?
Yes.
Okay. I personally, I do not mind forgoing the PE on going back and looking for somebody that's not an engineer, if they have that broad experience. And moving on our pay grade scale is going to be a lot more palatable than throwing big numbers out there. Because we can make a few other adjustments, hopefully, in that area to make that work, is my thought.
Yeah,
But that's just where I'm at on this.
I would add that I had your finance director pull what you currently have spent in consulting engineering fees in the last 3.5 years. Do any of you have an idea how much you
I
spent?
think we talked about that the last time you were here, actually. Yeah.
I didn't give you the number, but now I have the number.
No, we
In
talked about that.
3.5 years, it's $6.5 million.
But part of that would have been spent no matter what, because we always need outside engineers when you have a TID and when you have big projects. So it's actually a very inflated number and you don't want to mislead people. That's my opinion.
That's not the number you will save.
Yeah.
But for every dollar you spend having staff on board, you'll at least save $1 from that consultant, what you pay in consultant fees.
I don't doubt that. And I think this is an excellent presentation, gives us something to think about. Committee, feel free to weigh in. Phil?
Yeah, I guess I'm going to take kind of a different tact. I have some questions about the recruiting process that we're using. So is the process just to put an ad online and then whoever applies, or are we doing active recruiting? Are we sourcing people? How are we going about that, please?
We do a very active recruiting process. I personally made many calls and many emails out to people that are on my recruitment list. We have PAA has subscriptions and pays fees for access to other journals and other professional magazines and professional recruitment areas. We put that out on that market.
So what?
We've done it locally here. We've done it on your website. We've done it on the municipality. We're on the APWA sites. It's really a nationwide recruitment effort for PAA, and that's one of the things that we really pride ourselves on is what our contacts are and what our ability to reach the market is.
So
And again, the market is so tight right now. Even your local consultants here have such a demand for engineers that we're competing with that market on a regular basis.
So you're actively sourcing candidates?
What? I didn't hear
You're
that.
actively sourcing candidates?
Yes, we actively solicit candidates.
And then what is so 30 days, in my experience is not necessarily actually a very long time to have a position open. So on these positions, what is your average time to fill?
We typically put it out in the market for 30 days.
And
And
you get
that's
a
what you're,
a
that's
successful
exactly what
candidate
you are
within-
today.
You get a successful candidate within 30 days usually?
In 30 days, we typically find successful candidates, sure.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Yep, and we want that time frame to be short. We want people to make decisions very quickly. So when we get the applicants rolling in, so we can actually move forward with stuff. So it's a 30-day recruitment.
Thank you.
Yeah, at our last general government and finance meeting, it was really decided that we were going to let this thing expire as of tonight and then find out what happened and review things. If we didn't get a successful candidate, we could review it then later. So the 18th is our next general government and finance meeting, and what I'd like to do is look at this at that meeting. Right after that is village board meeting, and then we can make recommendations to the village board and decide what we want to do at that point.
I think the longer you wait, the more difficult it's going to be for recruitment. Again, there's local recruitment in the area at Whitefish Bay. But typically what happens when you get closer to the end of the year, people start to retire in the Wisconsin retirement system. And so the recruitments that are going on statewide tend to be more competitive than at this time of the year. So there may be, maybe a dozen openings at the first of the year. And so communities start recruiting when they know that people are going to retire. So if people turn in their notices at, November, they start doing the recruitments. So again, you want to kind of try to beat that recruitment period, that peak period when by the end of the year.
First of all, I'm familiar with PA. I know you guys do a good job on the recruiting process. I used you many times when I was on the board in Richfield, and we always had success. And we usually listen to what you guys were telling us because you're the experts out in that field. I don't have a problem here, and I know we can't do it tonight, and it has to go back to GGF, but I don't have a problem raising both of those, as you had mentioned, one pay scale. If that's what it would take. I mean, we're going around with this year after year after year, and we're not getting anywhere. So unfortunately, it's going to cost us more money, just as it has in some other positions here in the village of Germantown, and it's worth it to get that experience in. And I also agree taking the engineer portion out of that position, leave it optional, but it's certainly not needed if you have that engineer. So I would hope that GGF would look at this favorably, but I agree, time is of the essence here. We just can't keep, delaying this 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and another month and whatever. The recruitment's got to be continuous, as far as I'm concerned.
Any more comments from the board? Okay, thank you very much for your presentation. That's all you need from us on this, Steve. Okay. Moving on to Freistadt Road, no parking sign removal.
Good evening. Try to be as brief as I can tonight. Obviously, most people in the village here are aware there's been an uptick in civic events at Fireman's Park. During those events, event leaders are always looking for additional parking. Requests have been made of the police department in the past and in most cases granted to allow parking on both sides of Freistadt during the summer season. For the last few summers, those no parking signs have been bagged, and we haven't noticed an uptick in daytime parking. And so again, looking at some of the signage around the village, some of them are starting to deteriorate just a little bit. And as we're looking to replace them, we're just checking to make sure that they're a necessity yet. We've consulted with the police department, we've consulted with the VFW, and before you tonight, we have a recommendation with some drawings of what's currently out on Freistadt Road. Parking allowed on the north side, no parking on the south side. That's the current situation. And what we're proposing is that we would allow parking on both sides of Freistadt Road with the exception of near the Veterans Memorial. So again, recommendation from staff to remove the no parking signage along the south side of Freistadt Road. Any questions? Happy to answer them.
I have a question, Scott. Have we had any comments or complaints from the people who live along Freistadt Road?
We haven't any comments or complaints from the residents that live right there. We did reach out to the local VFW just to kind of see how it would affect them. And again, I think they thought it was a positive thing. When they have events there, it allows for some additional
So
parking.
right, currently, we can park in front of the VFW, in front of those homes on the north side of the street anyway.
Can already. Yep.
So,
Yep.
okay.
One more thing to add, this would change nothing with nighttime parking restrictions that are, village-wide. This is just daytime parking.
Committee?
Approval of the removal of the no parking signs on the south side of Freistadt Road.
Second that.
Discussion?
Yeah, I think this is a good thing too. I mean, the road is wide enough there to accommodate parking on both sides and still have through traffic. They get into the eastbound areas where there's gravel and ditches. Parking has gone that far. It's several times this summer with some of those bans and the 4th of July. So I think this would be helpful just to have that extra parking.
Any more discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It's unanimous.
Thank you.
Thank you, Scott. Department of Transportation, proposed rehabilitation of the Holy Hill interchange. Is that you, Steve?
Yeah, I can present this, and we do have both Bruce and Scott could help answer questions if any come up. But just some background on this. For several years now, the village has been looking at the Holy Hill interchange and working with the Department of Transportation. You may remember a few years ago, we did a traffic impact analysis focusing on that area with Richfield and Washington County. The results of that impact analysis were provided to the Department of Transportation. And they, as a result of that, pulled the Holy Hill overpass out of the construction schedule that was done on County Line and Freistadt and Maple this year. So originally, Holy Hill would have been done at the same time, but they said because of the results of the traffic impact analysis, they wanted to take a longer look at that. One of the alternatives that they initially looked at was a complete reconstruction of the interchange, which was going to be about a $15.3 million project. And they were looking for funding from both Richfield and Germantown for that alternative. Working with them, we asked them to look at other options. Actually, the staff from Washington County, Village, Germantown, Village of Richfield, all had a meeting with the Secretary of Transportation last spring and conveyed the concerns to the Secretary of Transportation. They came back a couple of weeks ago with alternative number one, which would keep the superstructure of the overpass in place. It still has a useful life of 20 to 30 years that DOT would like to not replace it until its useful life is expired. But they would reconfigure the deck of the overpass so they would have 2 lanes going in each direction and then traffic signals on each end. They completed, using the data from the traffic impact analysis, they did some analysis on what traffic flows would look like, and found that there would be the wait times at peak periods would be well within acceptable limits, all of them less than a minute at peak periods, even projecting out full growth on both sides of Interstate 41. So they were recommending going ahead with alternative number one. The DOT does not require village approval for the design of this. They did ask staff that we bring this back to the boards, that if the boards felt strongly that you wanted to pursue alternative 2 and there was support for putting the additional funding in to completely replace the superstructure, the interchange itself, they would go further along with that design. But otherwise, they'll go ahead with alternative 1.
Make a motion to recommend the village board adopt alternative 1 from the Department of Transportation and the rehabilitation of Holy Hill Interchange.
Second.
Bill?
How much does it cost?
The cost for the village would be zero.
Free.
It'd be free.
For alternative one.
It's a great idea.
Yeah.
State
Yeah.
funding.
The state would pay the full amount under alternative one.
Free isn't free.
Perfect.
Have a motion and a second. Any more discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It's unanimous. Moving on to D, State Municipal Funding Agreement for Wisconsin Highway 167 from I-41 to Wisconsin Highway 145. Steve, is that you too?
This is me as well. This is another item that came through from the Department of Transportation. They are planning the rehabilitation, repaving of basically be Lannon Road, Mequon Road, Highway 167, from the highway over to Fond du Lac Avenue. And that is that's considered a connecting highway. And I think we've had some of these in the past before the village board, but the village is asked by the DOT, required by the DOT, asked might be too kind of a word, to pay for 25% of the design costs, which in this case are approximate $280,000. The remainder of the project, which would be about $9.5 million, would be paid for out of state and federal funds. So my recommendation here is to approve a motion to forward this to the village board for approval.
I think it's important to note that this, the bidding process for construction of this road will not even take place until 2028. We're going to be living in a real different world then. If this were next year, I'd be worried about that money, but 2028, a lot's going to change. Committee, what do we do?
Can I just ask Steve one question? Where would the 280 come out of the highway funds at that time? More than likely?
We would, and there would be, the 280 is spread over a series of several years.
Okay.
And they're going through the planning process, and it would be something we would incorporate into the capital budget.
Got it. Thank you.
Comments, questions? Motion? We need a motion for you, right, for this one?
Make a motion to approve the agreement. Is that what it is? The state mutual funding agreement for Wisconsin Highway 167 from Interstate 41 to Wisconsin Highway 145 and forward to the village board with a positive recommendation.
At a cost of 280?
Yes.
Okay. Any more discussion? Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, discussion? Hearing none, we'll vote. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? It's unanimous. And finally, presentation on the 2024 budget requests. Who's got that? And as a prelude to what we're going to hear from Matthew, this is just a taste to get our brains functioning correctly for the actual budget meetings. This is just an introduction to needs.
Get our blood pressure up early. Is that what you're saying?
Good evening, and just to follow that up, like Trustee Kaminsky said, these are very early budget numbers. These are raw. They haven't been fully reviewed. As the budget currently states, it's not balanced. So you'll see that in some of these departmental requests that, you know, the expenditures are quite high compared to 2023. That's because these are what the department had requested. On the agenda, it does say engineering and administration. I haven't had a chance to sit down with Steve and Bruce yet to go through that budget, so that will not be part of this presentation tonight. We're planning to connect early next week. If the committee would like, I can send that to them once that is done. So the first department we're looking at tonight is the highway requested budget. Here. You know, salaries and benefits make up roughly 1/3 of this budget. The other major operating supplies and expense portion of the budget is the $350,000 that we allocate for asphalt paving annually. One of the major increases in the requested budget for 2024 over 2023 is snow and ice supplies. That is due to a large increase in costs from the state, as well as an additional 1,000 tons we plan on purchasing in 2024 over 2023 with the completion of the new DPW building. Two of the other major budget drivers in the operating supplies and expense lines is gas and oil, increasing that to about $120 or $130,000 in 2024, and street lighting making up roughly $185,000. For the capital projects, that portion of the budget, the only capital project in the highway department budget is a 2024 patrol truck, which has increased over the past several years to $276,000. On the revenue side, what you won't see here is large increases to the intergovernmental revenues. It is projected that state transportation aid will go up 2% for general transportation aid and about 25% for connecting highways. That will result in an increase in intergovernmental revenues of about $50,000. But since the state hasn't sent out those estimates yet, I didn't want to include that in tonight's budget, but it is likely that those numbers will increase. You will see an increase in public charges for services. That is mostly due to the department and mostly the finance department receiving payments for invoices that we're sending out to individuals who hit lamp posts, other accidents that happen where they're charged for the damage of that property. Over the last 2 years, historically, budgeted those revenues around, I have to go back and look at 20 to 30,000. In 2022, it was roughly 90,000, and year to date, it's about 86,000. That's why I thought it was a fair estimate to increase those there.
Any other questions, committee, on this? No.
For the buildings and grounds requested budget, salaries and benefits, like most departments, make up about 50% of that budget. The other large budget driver for the buildings and grounds budget, making up a good chunk of the operating supplies and expenses, is contracted services. There's a slight increase for that, as well as additional window cleaning for all of our buildings. That costs about $160,000.
Why additional window cleaning? Where'd that come from? That's kind of weird.
I'm gonna pass that one over to Scott. It might not be additional. It might just be, I might have just called it out separately.
Okay.
For window cleaning?
Since the loss of our custodian, she used to do a lot of our window cleaning in all of our buildings. And so again, increase in the cleaning contract that we brought before you guys. This is our third year. So it's a pre-agreed upon increase, and then just some additional contracted window cleaning.
Okay.
Yep.
Some of the larger non-borrowed capital projects that were requested that I called out here, there were several that I can provide to the committee. I thought these were some of the larger ticket ones. Library sump pump for $13,000, library sidewalk replacement for $15,000, then $23,000 for senior center exterior painting. There were additional non-borrowed capital items, and I'd be happy to provide a list of all those non-borrowed capital projects, but those are the ones that I had called out.
A question for Scott, if you wouldn't mind, Scott. Can you just tell us about the non-borrowed capital? What's up with the sump pump? What's up with the sidewalk? What's up with the senior center exterior painting?
Sure.
How bad is it?
Yep.
Now, let's give us a scale of 1 to 10 on these things.
Last year, we had a failure in the sump pump at the library. Again, a lot of infrastructure in the basement, air handlers, condensers, all the different projects we talk about, everything runs out of that basement. We were able to repair the motor down there. Again, this is going to be an upgrade to the gallons per minute that those motors, there's dual action motors in there, and just making it increase to just make sure that we're protecting all of our assets down there. We get a heavy rain. The last thing we want to have is a failure.
And the library, is that something that we have to replace, or could we do some mud jacking, or, I mean, how bad is it?
So we've been making temporary repairs. If you've walked around the library at all, you'll notice that we've got some temporary patches that we've done there. Again, we did those a few years ago. Those are starting to fail. This is basically allowing us the ability to have the funds to go through and selectively pick slabs that need replacement and get that handled.
And then the senior center, the painting. When
Senior
was the
center
last
painting.
time it was painted, and how does it look now?
Yep, probably was last painted when the addition was constructed somewhere around 2008, 10, somewhere in that neighborhood. Again, wood siding, needs caulking, needs paint. It's definitely in need.
Okay, thank you. That's it.
Okay.
Unless somebody else has something. No.
I'll stay close.
Thank you, Scott.
The next budget is the 2024 requested budget for the Parks Department. Again, salary and benefits make up a majority of the budget, roughly 50%. The largest operating supplies and expense cost is the street tree maintenance. Historically, we had budgeted $100,000 over the last several years. The last 3 for sure that I've been here, and likely before that as well. For non-borrowed capital, 2 of the projects I wanted to call out was the band shell painting for $30,000. And I don't have that one listed here. And the fireman's small restroom paint and block ceiling for $13,000.
And again, band shell painting, the band shell's so new. It needs painting already?
Yep, we had talked about this briefly last year. Several have been out and seen it. We've had some failures in the paint. Again, that was a donated building
Okay.
to the village. There were some deficiencies as it was painted, we think originally. This is again, media blasting the entire metal structure and putting a good coating on that's going to last us 8 to 10 years.
Okay. Will we potentially be doing damage to the building if we put this off a year?
No, I don't think we would. We put it off a year, but I think it's
Okay.
another year isn't gonna hurt anything.
Okay, just in case.
Yep.
Just, you know.
Just in case.
And the bathroom is functional or non-functional?
The firemen's restrooms, again, it's been 8 to 10 years since we've painted the interior. It's a split block face building. It's not been sealed in my time with buildings and grounds. Again, I think we're getting moisture that's penetrating in and it's starting to cause the paint to flake on the inside. Again, the project goes hand in hand. We're going to paint the interior, we're going to seal the block on the outside, and hopefully have a good product in the end.
Okay. Thank you. Stay close.
And then for some of the Fund 40 capital projects that we typically borrow for, $40,000 for the restroom roof, the Halped roof for another $40,000. Annual truck replacement over the last, several years, we've been trying to replace 1 truck every year. It costs roughly $60,000. And then a compact loader for $120,000. Now, as a reminder, these are all capital projects. These are typically borrowed capital projects.
Questions, committee? I'm not as concerned about the capital projects at this point in time. I will be, but not tonight.
Yep.
Okay.
One of the smaller departments, if you will, is a residential yard waste facility. The majority of this budget is taken up by the recycling contract, and that's roughly $324,000.
No increase in salaries and wages? How come?
There's a slight increase. I mean, percentage wise, it's not much, but that is just based on
The other budgets?
correct. For the part-time ones, I did increase them in the 2024 budget, but just based on the dollar amount, that didn't change the overall budget amount. And these are mostly part-time staff.
Okay, thank you. But the fringe benefits are going up. So the salaries are going up less, but the fringe benefits are going up.
Yeah,
4% faster than the full-time staff?
Yeah, part of the changes there is the WRS increased the village's contribution for public employees by about public safety employees. It went up about 1%, and then for all other employees, I believe it was about 0.5%, maybe a little less.
Same across all the budgets then, please?
That they should be, and I can double check that.
Thank you.
Before you is the 2024 requested budget for the sewer utility. Taking a look at the revenues, I held the revenues flat 23 over 24, just based on we're currently beginning and in the middle of a sewer rate study. Based on, you know, the results of that study, we could see some shifts in those sewer rate revenues. But until that's complete, I didn't find it necessary to change any of the revenues. On the expense side, the largest expense, operating expense for the sewer utility are the MMSD charges. It's broken up into two parts. One is the capital charges and one is the user charges. Overall, that makes up about $5 million of the expenses for the sewer utility. Those numbers for 2024 will come out, you know, in the next month or so. So I did a slight increase of 3% over the 2023 budget, but we'll get those numbers from MMSD, you know, in the next month or so. Another large driver for the sewer utility budget is just the debt service and depreciation. Debt service, sewer utility pays 13% of the debt service for the DPW building. And depreciation makes up about another $500,000 to $600,000 of the budget. As a reminder, depreciation is not an actual expense that's given out, but it's the number of it represents the aging of the assets of the utility. Shouldn't say Fund 40, but for the capital projects for the sewer utility, county line land purchase for $1.1 million is a large driver for capital projects in 2024 for the sewer utility. The 2024 requested budget for the water utility. The revenues are essentially flat over 2023. Based on the timing of the completion of the well and tower, we expect to see the rate increase sometime, likely the end of 2024. And for that reason, I didn't increase the revenues just based on the timing of when we'll see that second rate increase. On the operating side of the water utility, you know, again, the Tower 3 painting, we're currently in the bid process to paint that tower. Depending on when that gets completed, we'll either begin that in 2023 or those funds will again be budgeted in 2024 to complete that project. So that's about $735,000, depending on what that bid comes in at.
A question on that. So the Tower 3 painting, doesn't that include some rehabilitation or some repairs as well on that?
Oh, and through that.
Yeah, my only comment is if we're going to put this in as painting, I think we should be inclusive and say that, you know, we're not, all of that isn't money just for painting. It's for rehabilitation or repairs that.
Correct. It's both painting and there's several components inside, some fabrication, some steel, some safety things we're installing on that tower.
I think when this is presented to the entire board, that should be separated out. Because yeah, that doesn't, I was like, boy, that's a lot of paint, you know, I mean, yeah, we have to kind of separate that out and make
We
sure.
can put
that we-
bullet points together on.
Yeah, that would be
kinda
awesome.
internally.
Yeah.
Sure.
You know, and then one of the other larger increases to the operating budget is $150,000 for the well number 7 rehab. So when looking at the operating budget, that's a large chunk of where that increase is coming from. On the capital project side, generator replacements for well 2 and 7 at about $300,000 each for a total of $600,000. And that covers all the Public Work Committee departments.
That's everything, right, Matthew?
Yep.
Okay, couple quick comments. Can we get that in our email box?
Yes. Yep.
That'd be awesome. Second would be, I would love to see a breakout of, prior to our budget discussions, of the other operating revenues, which is under each one of these.
Okay.
Because that's where I think that in that detail, if we all scrutinize that, we might see some savings. And then third, I encourage our committee for each of these things that were listed, when you get this in your email box, take a look at the sidewalk, take a look at the senior center paint. You know, obviously we trust you on the sump pump. We trust you on everything, but we just have to decide what we can afford and what we can't.
Yep. And I can provide a list of all of those.
That would be great. And let's make sure we do our homework. Like I know we do, but let's make sure we view all these things so we come back and we can actually hopefully lead this discussion at board level. Okay? Any other comments from anyone?
Yeah, and just in general, looking at this tonight and some of the other budgets that have been presented, I think we need to all have a very sharp pencil, because if we're going to keep taxes the same or low, we got a lot of work to do, which I think we all know. But these dollars certainly show that, and we're going to all have to have a very open mind to bring this thing under control. It's going to be a tough number of nights, believe me.
You know, we've had this before in like 2008 and 2009. We've been through this.
I wasn't born yet then.
Yeah, okay,
Okay.
but we had that when the economy really took that dip, and we really had very sharp pencils.
Yeah.
And this may be a year for that again. So any other comments on the budget? Hearing none, we'll move on to setting our next meeting date. I will probably miss that because I will be out. So I leave it up to you whether you want the first Tuesday or Wednesday of October, the 3rd or the 4th.
Yeah.
How are you doing, Rick? Are we moving back to Tuesdays now? Is that, what's your preference? Your Wednesday.
My preference would be Wednesday, just that month.
Now, how about Wednesday, the 4th at 5:30 PM in
That
this
works for
room?
Rick.
Okay.
For you.
Not just about.
Well, but I mean, I know you got the
Any other announcements? Steve, any other announcements from committee members?
my
Ron?
daughter's birthday that night on the 3rd.
Hello? Any other announcements from committee members? Hearing none, we will end this meeting at 6:40 PM. Thank you, everyone.